creating a positive legacy for urbanized music as a brand, as a duo, as individuals, but also creating space for the next generation.
That people know that I put it all on the line for hip hop. Like I gave it all to hip hop.
Here we are. Wow, I gotta admit, I've been nervous about this because like I'm doing these interviews now, and I'm getting to sit down with some really cool people, and you guys are like Chicago royalty. You know what I mean? Like with everything you guys have done for the hip hop community and the music community in Chicago, it's immeasurable.
The pleasure is all ours.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Any opportunity to talk about what we love, we're all in.
That's
So
right.
thank you for inviting us.
This is the Mutual Appreciation Society.
Yes.
So
Yes.
here we
Thank
go.
you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so it feels weird to say because hip hop has just had its 50th birthday,
Yes.
but between you two, there's a combined 60 years of history in hip hop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys have both been part of this culture for so long. Given your lengthy tenure in the hip hop community, what would you say is the moment that shines brighter in your minds above all others in your past?
Ooh.
Ooh, that's a good question.
You want me to go first? You're
Go
looking at
ahead.
me.
Go ahead. You got one? Yeah, you got one.
You know, I don't know if there are moments. I could say the moment I fell in love with hip hop, right? That could be the moment that transformed my life. I could say when I started organizing, because it was a spark of knowing really amazing people from different parts of town who I wanted to come together. And when I was able to bring them together, like that gave me a sense of accomplishment in some way. I think I have a bunch of tiny little markers along the way. I'm gonna have to think on that one if there's one, but maybe Chris has a more concise
No,
response.
I think my answer is very similar. Also, there's little things, right? Because I think personally, I'm never really content with things. You know what I mean? Like I'm always aspiring to find something bigger, right? So I don't really feel like I found that moment yet. But to Amina's point, I think when I discovered hip hop, right, when I first started realizing, breakdancing and MCing and DJing and, those things, I think that was an enlightening moment for me because it gave me something different to do than what my friends were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I came up with one.
Uh-huh.
You might agree.
Okay.
I think one of the brightest parts for me might be our participation in creating Chicago Hip Hop Heritage
yes.
Month.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not just because,
Yeah.
it's a pat on the back kind of thing.
Yes.
But just because I think at the time it wasn't anything anyone else was talking about, and we kind of went out on a limb, and in the short term we couldn't really see the payoff, but we just this year marked our 20th anniversary of Chicago Hip Hop Heritage Month. So in 2003 when the idea came about, I think we didn't know what the moment would be 20 years down the line, but we talk about it and be like, yeah, and in 5 years it's going to be like this, and in 10 years, but to see where it is in 2 decades, and feeling like the city is embracing it. We have like Chicago Hip Hop Heritage Museum, that some amazing Chicagoans built and are curating. So I think being a part of helping to create a month that recognizes Chicago hip hop, I think that might be it.
Yes.
That might be it.
Yes. That is what she said.
Good answer?
Yes. Great answer. Yeah.
The waves you're making is far-reaching. You know what I mean? And,
Yes. Thank you.
and that is admirable to create something that is going to touch a lot of people. You guys have both a vast amount of experience on both sides of the coin when it comes to hip-hop music.
Okay.
What would you say you prefer more? to put your all into a live performance to where you can connect with the audience, or to be alone in the studio where you put in the necessary hours to create greatness?
Another good question.
You go first.
All right. Well, I'm going to say that there's two different feelings, right? Of course. The live aspect is the live aspect, right? That nothing beats being in front of another human being delivering your art, right? Even better if they're familiar with you, right? And you doing your rapping or doing your hook or whatever, and they're doing it along with you. So I think there's no feeling greater than that. The flip side, though, the studio aspect of it, I think the way we work is not really as meticulous maybe as other artists might work, right? We're very casual and laid back. I could be in the studio just creating a track. I mean, it could be walking through the hallway and then she starts humming to it, and then all of a sudden we got the voice recorder out and we're like, hey, that sounds great. We got now a beat and a hook, and we might not revisit that track for another 2 weeks. Or she might be going through her phone and be like, hey, you remember this one? Then we kind of like build. So it's not as strenuous, right? So if I had to say my preference, I like being on stage and presenting for people, but I think the studio aspect of it is so chill and not rigid the way other people might be. And they're like, oh, I've got to get these albums done, or I got to do all these songs. We create based on what our inspiration is. If we don't feel like writing that day, we say, you know what? You feeling it? Nah, we'll pick another day, right? It still gets done, but kind of in our own time and space.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of echo that sentiment. Like I fell in love with the stage in that I was in drama club in high school. I was on the debate team. According to my mother, I've talked since I was 9 months old. And I don't know what I was saying, but so I love communicating with folks. And so when I, joined a rap group, the idea of that I could write my thoughts down and share them with the audience, and I could like move the crowd, that really inspired me. But to Chris's point, we're on our 28th year together.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to know each other. You're feeling each other's energy. And so he's making a beat. I'm getting inspired from the other room. I sometimes come in with lines and he's like, no, this track is for someone. It's not for you. But I think we inspire each other and like we feed off of what energy is in the moment.
Yeah.
Whereas on the stage, it's very scripted.
Yeah.
And like we know exactly what we're going to do when we get up there. So the energy is different. I think, to pick one, because I mean, you're writing songs in your pajamas.
Yeah.
With coffee. It's
Yeah.
a lot different from having to impress these people.
Yeah.
So different energy, but I really, really do enjoy the stage. Yeah.
All right.
And especially with this guy.
Yeah, especially with this young lady here. Yes.
Beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but if you could maybe go a little more in depth into it, what would you say was a singular moment that grabbed you when it came to your love for hip hop and creating music?
I would say.
You gonna let me go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
What you
Go ahead.
think?
You got something? You got something? There you go.
I think for me, it was. So the way I discovered hip hop, I grew up in Nigeria. My father's Nigerian. My mom's born and raised on the South Side, but she's DNA tested Cameroon. So both my parents are West African. But when I was 6, we moved to Nigeria, where I lived for 10 years. I'm going to date myself, but you've already dated us with the 30 years. So, but I come back after high school and miss the birth and like flourishing of hip hop. In a poetry class, a classmate is like, yo, I like your poems. Would you like to join my rap group? So I had been in drama, I had been in debate. I'm like, what is this rap thing? He's like, you just do your poems over music on stage. So in a way, that could have been the moment that I bought into this thing. But, and it's fitting that we're doing this today because, and I just posted about it, so it's very timely. And on August 28th, 1988, my little rap group, who I might add were, two of our members were the sons of a deacon. So, and we were all kids, like 17, 18. All our music was clean. And we did socially conscious music. And our shows were at community centers, storefront churches, block club parties.
People's living rooms.
People's living rooms, yes. We did do a living room in the housing projects, which, that was very interesting. But this was our entry into it. On August 28th, 1988, we get invited to Marquette Park to do an event that commemorates Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. What we rode up on, though, was a Klan rally. Right on the other side of that, as we drive around the park, because we're freaking out, like, oh my God, this can't be our place to perform. And I'm talking full-on rally. Hoods, a giant cross, people chanting. We get to the other side of the park. It's, I Have a Dream. We perform there. At the end of the show, the Klan rally is ending, and they're chanting, niggas go home, niggas go home. The neighborhood has come around, and now everyone's grabbing their stuff. We're racing out of the park. I had only been back in this country now for a few years. I'm not really processing what all is going down, but after this moment and this time, I think my desire to use hip-hop as a social justice vehicle was born. Like, I didn't even know it was a thing, but I knew I have this voice and this platform, and this is still happening. It's not 1948, it's 1988. So I think that was also like a very transformative moment for me, knowing that this platform is important. Ironically, some 20 years later, I'm hosting a festival in that same park, taken to the streets, sponsored by the Inner City Muslim Action Network. It's like black people and brown people and tall people and short people and all kinds of people. Made me feel really old, but also a part of the continuum of history. And so it's like, to the point earlier of like little moments, it's like these little moments that make me go, yes, I'm glad, like, yeah, I'm sold in hip hop. So for me, maybe that moment in Marquette Park might have been part of what made me decide that I was gonna stay in hip hop.
Wow, that I don't even have
Sorry.
a story even 10% remotely close to as amazing as that.
Only because the
that story.
anniversary is
Yes.
today.
I would say for me, that's a great story, by the way. Yes. I would say for me, a lot of it would just be once I started to explore the different aspects of hip hop. So for me, I come from a family of, musicians. My grandmother played the drums, the organs, grandfather, uncles, everybody else. So a lot of my thing was always based in music when I was coming up. So I would hear, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Stevie Wonder, and then it would transition to Air Supply, you know what I mean? Or, the Rolling Stones. So my mom had such a crazy collection of music that was always going within the house. So before I could leave out, kids in our age in the 70s and stuff, we couldn't leave out of the house until after the house was clean. You couldn't watch cartoons, all of these different things. So, I would be cleaning up the house, and then, we'd have music playing on the turntable. So in between, me cleaning up in the bathroom or something, then I'm running to switch a record. So like, I just started listening and started getting more familiar with music. And I would sit down as a kid and I would read all the liner notes and know who played the saxophone, who played the bass line, who played the drums, and then I would even do different things with me and my brother, because he was older than me, but he was also a DJ. And I would have contests with him where I quiz him about who played on that Commodore Commodore's record. He'd be like, oh, we do bets and stuff like that. So I was really just a lover of music itself because it was always around me. But then when breaking came out, the first thing I was just like, damn, that's actually rather dope. So I was like, you know what? I think I can do it, right? So I was in junior high around that time. There was other cats in high school doing it. We were getting our little breaking crews and all that. So I was like, all right, cool. Now I'm a b-boy, right? So I got my little flight suits, all of that stuff. Got the crazy backspin. Then Run DMC came out with Hard Times. And then prior to that, there was, of course, The Message and all that stuff by Melly Mel. But when Run DMC came out with Hard Times, and I heard the message that they had within the song, but it was still so hip-hop and so hard. You know what I mean? I was like, ooh, I really like that, right? But I didn't dabble into hip-hop yet, right? Like as far as emceeing aspect of it. Then a little bit later on, I had a few friends in junior high. They were doing graffiti. So they were like, yo, let me show you how to do bubble letters and all that. So now all of a sudden I got a notebook. I'm tagging. I'm doing all this other stuff. Fast forward, by the time I get 16, LL Cool J comes out with Radio. And that record just totally, that was like the first record I bought with my own money. And that record just kind of blew my mind. And I was like, oh shit, I have to be an MC. So then, I used to freestyle and everything then, but then that's when I really started taking it serious. Then from there, it just kind of progressed from I was already DJing, I was already b-boying, did a little bit of graffiti. That was short-lived because my mom was like, if you get caught tagging somewhere, I'm not getting you out of jail. So I was just like, all right, that's over with. But then it went from there. And then as being an MC, it was challenging for me to be able to find beats. So, I had this great collection. I would go and take my mom's records, my brother's records, all that stuff. But then I would go to a studio in Bellwood called Rox Davies Basement Studio, and I would take the records and I would spend all of my little McDonald's money that I made working at the time just making one track for like 2 hours because, the guy's got a sampler. He barely knows how to work it. We're learning how to work the equipment. So then eventually at a certain point, I was like, I just got to get smarter. So went and got my own drum machine. Then from there, started becoming a producer. So all of these different things were moments that are leading me to where I'm now. So I don't really have a real defining moment where I was like, oh my God, it was just, it was more so a bunch of different things. And with so many different elements of hip hop, I just got to a point where I'm like, well, how many of these can I do and can I do them well? And then all my peers around me were doing the same thing. So not everybody was just breakdancing. They were MC and they were doing graffiti. So if you were a hip hop head, you kind of just practiced all of those different elements. So for me, it was just being able to discover all of those different things within my youth to get me to where I am now.
You both have given so much of your energy to the Chicago hip hop scene through Spillane's, through Master Groove Association, through Urbanized Music, documentary filmmaking, gracing the stage at Steppenwolf. You know what I mean? Like, your grassroots activism and the catalog, massive catalog of artists that you produce for. I mean, the list is long and seemingly endless and goes on veritably forever. After achieving so much already, what is the ultimate aspirations when it comes to you creating timeless music?
Honestly, just between us, probably to leave a positive legacy.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, like I could say, to do whatever things, but at the end of the day, I think I do it all out of my love and passion. I think we do it out of our love and passion. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, at the end of the day, my ultimate thing will be to have left a positive legacy. So in order to do that, I have to do my best every day and be the best I can be. Yeah. But, because, it's clearly not to make money. It was never for that.
Exactly.
So,
for the love.
Yeah.
For the love. No, I feel you. I've shared the same thought process. I would say just probably my biggest thing is to pass something on for the next generation, right? Creating a positive legacy for Urbanized Music as a brand, as a duo, as individuals, but also creating space for the next generation, right? You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to be here forever, right? So we want other artists that are up and coming, that are like-minded, right, that can speak to the generation that they currently are in, and even younger generations, right, but create a platform, create oasis for them to kind of be able to come in. So I think for me, that's kind of like the bigger thing, is just being a mentor and leaving legacy for them.
I think that's a great earthly realm answer.
It is, right?
Mine is after yours. Then we do that one. Yeah.
You both were deservedly selected as envoys along with Ange 13 to represent the Chicago Hip Hop Initiative and traveled to West Africa, where you promoted how hip hop can be used to promote social change. And Amina, you even directed a documentary about this.
Yes.
How transformative was this for you both in your careers moving forward?
Wow.
I have an answer, but
I'll let you go.
You sure?
First. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
think about your answer. No.
Yeah. I got an answer too.
I know you do. I honestly, for me, I think having grown up in West Africa, not Ivory Coast, which is a French-speaking country, and Nigeria is an Anglophone country. But for me, I think having the opportunity to take two African Americans, two children of Africa, back to their motherland, I think was most meaningful for me personally. To be able to do that, and for hip hop to be the vehicle. Like, we went to Africa doing hip hop, like from Chicago, like little bitty Chicago, going all the way, the three of us. So I think for me, and for somewhere in my life journey, having that opportunity to take two folks back home with hip hop and having the U.S. government pay for it, I think was meaningful for me. But I know you have some additional stuff that resonated.
Yeah, well, no, first and foremost, I want to thank you for bringing me along for the trip. So I do appreciate that. For me, coming from, Inglewood, and, then being a, transplant out to Bellwood and Oak Park and Maywood and those areas, I never really envisioned myself traveling abroad much at all. You know what I mean? It wasn't in the front of my lobe at all. So, like, even when the proposition came up, I was in the back of my mind, I kept saying, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Right. All the way up to the day of getting the passport, going to get the shots, getting in the cab, packing everything up, getting on the plane, and then finally touching down in Ivory Coast. It was life-changing for me, just because it, knowing, of course, through DNA stuff and knowing that I'm from Nigeria and Ivory Coast and Cameroon and all of these different places, for me to be able to go, it was a culture shock as well, right? Because, I'm going to places there's like no toilet seat. I'm like, hey, there's no toilet seat. They're like, yo, welcome to Africa. You know what I mean? Just other different things, lights not working, not having Wi-Fi, access to social media. So it was things that was naturally accustomed and comfortable for me, right, being here in America and everything, but going out there and understanding that those resources are not always readily accessible for people to be able to have all the time. And then also for me, it was really life-changing to see, kids as small as 4 or 5 years old working with everybody in the entire family. You had some grandmas and grandpas as old as, in their 80s, 85, 90s. Everybody in the family is working, doing what they need to do. Physical labor, from carrying wood to, selling whatever their goods are, but doing all of this stuff before the sun sets, and doing what they need to do. So it was very humbling to me to see my people in a different light, right? Because we always get the whole Western aspect and, the glamour, the glitz and everything. So for me, it was total different, like going there and then coming back. And then it also made me realize that I needed to put more of a message within my music. That didn't mean I had to be pro-black. That didn't mean that I had to be Public Enemy or anything like that. But because we were doing workshops at, 7 different regions, so I'm talking to kids, right? So I have to, they didn't understand everything that I was saying, but, I felt uncomfortable if I had certain language in there that I was just like, that's not the perception that I want someone who doesn't even really understand me to have. So when I came back, I decided to change a lot of my content, and be just really cautious of what I'm putting into my music as well. Yeah. And definitely just opening up my whole just like third eye when it came to working with international artists, because then I started working with Noble MC and Sentiment and S. Dean, and currently I'm working with Muyen from Nigeria. So it really definitely opened up the international lane for me big time.
And I think I just wanted to add another thing that I think that was really valuable in the trip was that because we were hip hop envoys and it was a cultural exchange talking about hip hop as a vehicle for peace and tolerance, and also women empowerment, which is why there were 2 women and 1 guy. But it was also a way for us to really connect with hip hop. Like I tell people, we speak English, they speak French, but we all spoke hip hop. Yeah. Because when the beat dropped, when the music played, we didn't know what they were saying. They didn't know what we were saying, but everybody was like this. Yeah. And so it was really a connection. Also, while we were there, we collaborated with artists from each of the 7 regions. Mm-hmm. And the embassy hosted us all on the last day. So the embassy sponsored a representative from each of those regions in the country to come down. They formed the Côte d'Ivoire Hip Hop Initiative, modeling a sister organization to Chicago Hip Hop Initiative. Mm-hmm. We stayed in touch with them. Chris recorded projects with the artists. So it was more than just, oh yeah, we went and did hip hop, or they met some Americans, but we really built lifelong relationships with people and connected with those artists, and were able to tell, because this also speaks to what you were saying in the workshops, dispel the myths about hip hop that have been exported about what hip hop is. And so people were like, oh, y'all telling us hip hop is about peace and culture, but all of your rappers are in jail or dead from gun violence. Look at Biggie and Tupac, and you're telling us it's about peace. So we were able to really educate them and teach them about the elements and tell them, the history and why things were important. And I think that as a hip hop ambassador, was important, that we didn't just go there to turn up, but we really took the essence of what hip hop is and tried to share it.
Yeah, and help them institute a lot of change as well. Like there was one group who had been wanting to perform at a nightclub out there that they frequent all the time, and for whatever reasons the promoter or the owner of the club would just never let them perform. But because we were there, right, we were special guests from the embassy, they put us in this nice little, foo-foo sweet spot and all this other stuff. And we performed, and we talked to the club owner, and we were like, hey, you should give them a shot. They live here, they frequent. And that night he let them actually get on stage and perform, so it was small things that were big things that we were actually, creating change by, whether it been our Western ignorance coming in, think, well, I can come in and do whatever I want, but in our way of empowerment, or how we're able to do things here and have those liberties, we were able to give them that kind of cultivation and backbone to be able to say, well, let me ask, right? You know what I mean? But sometimes asking might be a matter of life and death, depending on from another place. So it was a lot of just moments of change creating that happened out there.
Yeah. Go catch the film. Documentary. It's on.
Yeah. Catches at
urbanizedmusic.com. Thanks to Ange 13, Ange was like, when we go out there, we better tape everything.
Yes.
So we had flip cams and we had our cell phones, and we taped everything. Our goal was, I'm going to tape this and go back home and show my friends. But we had 80 gigs of footage. Like, we're dumping footage from the phones every night. We're doing little wrap-up videos. Like, we're capturing everything. And we come back with all this footage, and I'm like, we should make a movie. So I bought Sony Vegas, and the first film I made was 4 hours long. Wow. And people were like, my mom was like, no one's going to watch a 4 hour movie. I'm like, but there was so much in it. There's so much. I had captions. Yeah, I had it was all like, like anything I could put on that screen, I put on that screen. And so I met with a professional, Mike Phillips, God bless him, Southside Projections, yes, who gave me some wonderful advice, got the film together, and it premiered in SimFest that year, which was great because right after we left the country, broke into civil war. And so the artists that we had built relationships with were like hunkered in their homes. We would talk to them and you'd hear bombs going off in the back and they're like, we can't go outside. And they were like, we got to make this music. We're going to make this music and send it to you because we don't know if our internet's going to get cut off and we don't know what's going on. So they produced, Chris worked with them. They produced a Unity album.
Yeah, I did produce like half of it, but between them, be sending files back and forth and
like during the
video
war.
calls, you hear bombs and stuff going off in the back, and they were just like, we got to get this album out.
But they knew hip hop was their outlet. They were like, we got to use this vehicle to make this out and let people hear our message. So yes, it was a powerful trip.
It was.
From an outside observer's perspective, it seems there's a lot of ageism in the culture of hip hop, more so than any other genre of music, which makes no sense to me because Rolling Stones can go play a concert, nobody says it's not anything. But for some reason, they feel like there's a ceiling that hip-hop artists can't go past, which is insane. The younger generation want what's new. I like to think of it sort of like they have a goldfish mentality, like we have 30 seconds of memory. You know what I mean? And so if you haven't come out in the last 2 years, they don't know about you. You know what I mean? Through your work in the community and as a professor at Columbia College, you have been actively bridging the gap between these generations and educating the youth about the past and keeping your fingers on the pulse of the future and the present. Would you say guiding the youth in the right direction is as important as you continuously creating your own music?
I would say that it is probably more important because they could care less whether or not I'm making music, I think it's probably more important that I do guide them, though. As it happens, my hip-hop course at Columbia and at SAIC, because I got to give them some love, are both kind of history courses. And so the beauty is we have to live in the old. We don't get a chance to fast forward because the class is about the old. But I think it's also a great opportunity for me to bridge the gap. What I find is that most of my students really have a greater value for the older classics when they are presented to them. One, they don't know what to go look for. They're not going to go on the internet to look up Curtis Blow. They're looking for what's hot and what's current. But in a classroom setting, I can introduce them to the history and the journeys, and then also show them where they fit in the continuum of history so they know why those old stories are actually important. Kool Herc, I heard him in an interview, and I love the quote, because he says hip-hop is for the young and the young at heart. So I was born in the very, very latter end of 1969. Like, it was almost over, but I got here. And so I know that I am not, I am considered, I'm young to my 102-year-old aunt, but I'm still youthful. And so I think that as long as we keep making music that reflects who we are and sticking to the essence of hip hop, of telling your story and sharing your narrative and being authentic to our message, then we can still keep making music that's relevant. But it might not be relevant to a 22-year-old who really just wants to turn up. But at the same time, I've done shows for young people who are like, oh my God, I love you. You remind me so much of the music my mom played in the car. And I'm like, oh. Or they're like, oh my God, like you really have that like old school vibe. And I'm like, I just wrote that song last week. I promise it's not old. But, that's the beauty of hip hop too, right? That within hip hop, we do have these generations. Mm-hmm. So it's okay that they don't listen to my music. It's okay if I don't listen to their music. But what is important is that they understand the history, where they fit in the history, where we fit in the history, and why it's important for them to know that, because they're going to build the future. And if we have no concept of our past then. So I think that's why it's more important for me to teach and guide rather than making music. But I still have to make music so that I can show them that I'm really still about that life.
No, I love that. I would say to the ageism aspect of it, to your point, right? I love Mick Jagger, I love Rolling Stones, but good Lord, like, Mick's, you got a lot of, not to kind of, play the deflect game and say, oh, well, what about rock and roll or what about jazz musicians? You're only as old as you allow yourself to be, right? And you only put a glass ceiling in front of yourself, right? Nobody stops you from that. So as long as I can talk, walk, breathe, grab a mic, program a drum machine, create music, I'm going to do what makes me happy, right? And those are people who actually live longer. So those who have things to say about ageism, do the things that you really love and you might live longer. That'll help you out.
Yes.
So I think that's important. And I think also just to if we look at the 50 years of hip hop now, right? You're looking at hip hop artists who probably haven't really graced the stage within, some 4 or 5 years, some decades, whatever. They've all come back, right? They've band up together, right? That Force show, you got LL Cool J, you got The Roots, you got all of these different artists, right? But they're doing these things and they're selling out arenas. So, and I'm not one. I love the new generation. I love where some of their thought processes are. Some of the other stuff I could do without, right? But it's not for me to judge what they have to deal with. It's for me to understand in order to be a mentor to try to get them to the next level. But while they have shows that are not selling out, we still have artists who have been in the game that are still selling out arenas and doing different stuff and putting out, to Amina's point, putting out content. I don't want to hear LL Cool J sounding like Lil Durk. I want LL Cool J to sound like LL Cool J, right? So I want to hear that same fire that he had when he first came out now, right? And there's a market for it, and there's a market for all of it. So just the same point where my mom didn't really care for me listening to Public Enemy and maybe X-Clan and some of the others. She was like, oh, that's a little too militant. What are you going to, But it's the same thing, right? So we can't necessarily say, well, I don't really care for you listening to that. We got to find out what's the message. Why are you listening to it, right? Why is drill music important to you? Have conversations and say, well, you know what? Really those narratives are really just glamorizing something that we need to kind of stop happening. I don't want them to rap like us, right? That's not what it's for. Be yourself, right? But I think when they're able to get, the aspects of hip hop, the different breakdowns of it from MCing to DJing, get a little bit of history. Sometimes I just talk to youth and I give them basic history of Chicago stuff, right? Gang culture, stuff like that. Then all of a sudden their third eye is open. They're like, tell me more, right? And it's not anything different. It's just them understanding that we've brought something different to the table.
Over the years, you both have created some classic music which speaks to the sounds of Chicago. But you also have had a hand in creating music for artists around the world. Like you said, artists in Africa and that you met through your travels. What do you prefer more, to create your own music or to collaborate with other artists? And who would be your dream collaboration, either on an album or if you were to go on a tour with or grace the stage with?
I would say, honestly, dream artists like Quincy Jones. Yeah, Quincy Jones or like a Herbie Hancock or something like that. Just being in the studio with them. And I know people would initially think like, oh yeah, I'd be in there with Dr. Dre or Pete Rock or Premier. No, Quincy Jones, right? Because Quincy Jones, one, has the experience. Two, he's a Chicago native. And then three, he's been, I'm a person who wants to put people together to create a finished product. And then that leads into the collaboration aspect of it. I love collaborating. But sometimes we know, of course, with technology and stuff, that's not always as easy for you to be in the same physical space. But I've literally been able to create some amazing records. And like I've worked with an artist named Night Owl from St. Louis, and we literally have about 5 songs that we've done maybe over 5-6 years, right? I met him finally for the first time last year face to face at St. Louis. Wow. But during this time when we met each other, it was kind of like, like we had already been running into each other, right? Because we talk on the phone, right? Or we do a video call, or we send music back and forth. So I love the collaboration aspect of it, because when I can create my piece of music, right, or whatever ideas I have, and then send it to Lagos, Nigeria, and say, hey, Muyen, what you got for this, right? And he's like, oh, I got you, and then he writes on. I mean, it's the beauty when it all comes together. Love it.
Shoot, I have no idea. I've been racking my brain this whole time thinking, like, this person, this group, that group. I don't really know. Like, and to the idea with collaboration, I like, okay, I want to say I don't like collaborating, but that will make me sound like not a good
But why,
community member.
But why?
You know what I think it is? I think because the creative process sometimes for me is so personal that there's not room for anyone else in there yet, maybe. Like later, like maybe after I built the thing and decided, okay, I'm ready to bring this out of the house and see if someone wants to be a part of it. But the actual creation process sometimes for me is so personal, and not personal like, but just I get really in my own head, and I may overanalyze, or maybe the person might, like, I think this might be the only person that I can write with, like we can write in, but otherwise, like, I'm overthinking, and because
I understand how you operate too. So when we're putting together songs, it's like it might be a little bit here, it might be a whole lot here, and then you know what? Scrap all of that, you know what I mean? So I get that, right? Because you also put yourself in the pressure of being in the studio now. You're collaborating with producers, and somebody who's going to come in and sing the hook, somebody who's going to play a line on a saxophone or something.
And sometimes it does work really well, like it fits.
Sometimes that energy is
we're having
perfect,
fun.
And then other times it's extra added pressure. If you're not used to being in that environment to create, it can be challenging, right? I was just in the studio a couple weeks ago, and it was kind of like, all right, let's make something on the spot. And I'm like, I usually do this in my house in the sanity of my own home. So, right, person's paying for studio time, and I'm like, but it takes me a lot more time to kind of really get that feel. But if I'm in there and we're, people are like kind of like expecting me to like come up with something, it might take a whole lot longer. It might come right then and there. So there's also that extra added pressure with collaborating of maybe not moving at the same pace that everybody else is too.
Yeah. I think I would pick Prince.
Yes. I was going to say Prince also, but we know he's not.
Yeah, he is not. I was thinking a few of my people aren't here anymore, but definitely Prince. Yes.
I did perform for him.
You did. You did perform for Prince.
And he spoke to me like all but 5 syllables or something like that. So, but
that's it. That's a great experience.
That's 5 more syllables than he's spoken to a majority of the world.
He did rare interviews, so the fact that he said something,
and I want to perform for him and see, and you got to meet him, so
yeah, totally fanboyed out too.
Speaking of live performances, over the decades of your history in the music industry and hip hop, you've graced a lot of stages. In your mind, what is the one memorable performance that you've had that outshines all others? And is there a stage anywhere in the world that you yearn to perform at that you would feel would be the pinnacle?
Okay, can I have more than one?
Yeah.
Sort of. Right. So one, I might say Jay Pritzker, Millennium Park stage. But no diss to all the times we've been on that stage, but the first one, first time we got up there. Yeah. And the first time was actually the Hip Hop and Blues show was the first show.
Yeah.
And this was, I think, the year it opened, or like a few years after the stage opened. And we were there with Sylvia Ewing, and she was curating a show for maybe Be Easy, maybe Steppenwolf, but Billy Branch was on the bill, Avery R. Young, Ugochi, FM Supreme, Beat Monsters. It was an amazing show, and being on the biggest stage in the city of Chicago, I think was great. But I'm going to steal and pull back, still connected to Sylvia Ewing, who has been just an amazing mentor.
Yes.
she had us at Steppenwolf, and we did a show. It was kind of an honorary performance, because like performance, and then they do an interview, and performance and interview. But they interviewed, among the distinguished guests were Professor Tim Black, who is an instrumental figure in not just Black history, but Chicago Black history. He passed away, I think we lost him a year or two ago, at age like 100 or something. He was a professor of mine. He was one of the people they interviewed. Laura Washington, someone else, and Coco Taylor.
Oh, wow.
And as one of our performance segments, we got to do Wang Dang Doodle with Coco Taylor. And so it wasn't even my song. I wasn't in this moment even doing one of my raps. But to do Wang Dang Doodle with the queen, Coco Taylor herself. And she and I had a very special moment in the dressing room later that holds a very special place in my heart. When she called me out and was like, come here for a minute. I want to talk to you. Out of all the other people in the lobby, telling me what a great voice she felt I had. And how she was able to distinguish my voice out of all the performers on stage. And I'm thinking like, is she sure? And I even said, like, you sure it was me? And she's like, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I heard. In fact, while she was talking to me, this kid comes up and he's like, Miss Taylor, they're waiting for you. And she was like, don't you see me talking? And I'm like, oh. And so she gave me some wonderful advice that day that I hold dear. But sharing the stage with her takes the cake. Yeah, that's my one of my most favorite stage moments.
Wow.
Boom.
Bam. I can't even. I'm like, all right, exit, stage right, stage left. No. I would definitely have to say the Millennium Park shows, definitely. I mean, because the Pritzker stage is just gigantic, and it's like you feel like a rock star. You like running from one side to the other side. I would say that. I would say some of my most memorable live performances would have to be the entire trip that we took to Côte d'Ivoire, because we did 7 shows in 7 different parts of the Ivory Coast, and each one was different. I mean, it was so different. We didn't really know what to expect each night. I mean, at one point I remember a couple of places like they had made the stage that day. You know what I mean? Like it was just a lot. But I think the one show in particular was a place called Abinguro, and when we performed there, the crowd went crazy. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. Like we did the name of course, the entire documentary was called Keep It Moving, which was off of one of our songs from the UMAC album that Ange also featured on. But when we did that song, it was our wrap-up song of every single show, and we discovered it when we did it after the second town. And we put Andrew, said, Andrew, you got a verse? He's like, yeah, I got a verse. Well, let's close out our show each night with all of us together, because typically we would do the shows where Andrew would come out and open, or we would switch, Urbanized would come out and open, and then, vice versa. But we started putting the shows, as we started moving along, we started just really putting them together, where maybe Andrew might do 2 songs, and then we'll do 2 songs, and then, put it all together. But we would do this song at the end of the night, and literally they would go ape shit. Like everybody, keep it moving. I mean, they wouldn't even understand in English. They'd be, keep it Lugan. It's just, It was just so crazy. So I think for me, like, as I'm even getting goosebumps right now thinking about it, it was just so intense. And to, be somewhere where they didn't know us, right? We didn't have records all out there, nothing of the sort, but they embraced and hung on to every single line, every beat that dropped, every scratch, every hook. You name it. Like, they made me feel like I was a fucking rock star when I left there. So I would say all of those shows, from this first one all the way to the last one, monumental for me.
Vicariously through you, may I also say that I'm sure Glam Slam was cool, performing at Princess Club.
Absolutely, yes,
and what about the place where you heard they would throw stuff at you if they didn't like you?
Oh my God, that was in Compton. So when I was with the rap group Spillane's, shout out to Spillane's, we back, new music on the way. We performed in Compton. So we at the time we were managed by Doc Brown, who worked with another manager, Greedy Greg from the West Coast, who managed Second to None, DJ Quick, AMC, all of those guys. So AMC was in Chicago at the time. We were out there touring with DJ Quick. So Quick had just released his album. They were like, "Yo, we finna go do Doodle's music in Compton," which if you watch the NWA movie, that was the same place where NWA performed. So we were there. There was this group that was backstage called OFTB, Operation From the Bottom. All these dudes were from the Watts Projects, like swole arms, fresh out the jail, you know what I'm saying? But super cool dudes. Like, I'm talking about some of the coolest dudes you meet. So, we were young at the time, playing like 18, 19, not too old, not too young. But we were back there, right? And they gave us Super Sacco and Gin, which was the first time we'd ever had that. And our first time ever smoking what they called Cali Chronic weed. We were so high that literally we were like so fucked up before it was time to go on that I like ran to the side and I was like, I can't go out there. And they're like hitting me like, man, snap out of it. You got to go out there, And then Operation From the Bottom, the guys from the group that tell us like, yo, we just want to let y'all know when y'all go out there, if they don't like you, they'll drag you off the stage. So at that point, I'm extra fucking paranoid now. So I'm like, I'm getting ready to die in Compton. You know what I mean? I'm going out here. We of course, we got on all this red and blue. So we were just like, some West Suburban kids going out to LA not knowing what the fuck was going on. So we get out there. So usually whenever we did the shows, like Tony would kind of go out first and kind of like get the crowd hyped before the intro song, whatever comes on. So this time we're like, all right, we're going to do this. They got me all calm. I'm like, all right, let's go out. Let's do the show. So the music drops. Tony goes out. He starts doing the intro. We all just fucking stayed behind the curtain while he's out there. And he turns around. He's like, where the fuck are y'all at? And then he kind of like pulls us out. And then we kind of like let the song go. We get into it. But literally like the stage was here. We were all about 10 feet back from it.
You didn't want to get snatched.
We didn't want to get snatched, no. But by the time we got into the third song, like they were into it. We had all the girls with the gold teeth and the big bamboo earrings and everything, and they were all like, yo. So at that point, then we felt comfortable to move closer to the stage. But yeah, that was...
Second part of the question, though.
Yes. Oh, wait, what was the second part? We got caught up.
What is there a stage worldwide that you yearn to perform at?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Or like in your mind's eye, be like, wow, that is where I want to be.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever really thought about that.
I haven't thought about that.
I would just say like
a stadium.
Yeah,
for
that's
me.
what I was gonna say. Yeah, just whatever
it could be stadium too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't have
Any
a specific
stadium.
place, but just a bunch of big fucking stadiums with a lot of people.
That's full of people, not like like 8 people, like a big full stadium.
Yeah.
I'm talking. It could be like Royal Albert Hall or
It could be,
I would go.
Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, Wembley. Yeah, that worked.
Man, I'll do Soldier Field. I don't care.
Field,
like it's Chicago, right there.
Don't matter. Yeah, don't matter. Just a place with a lot of people and people who are ready to vibe out. Yeah.
United Center would be cool though, wouldn't it?
Urbanized
music
cool.
at United Center.
That would be.
Just urbanized.
You just spoken into existence.
Boom! It's on its way.
Do you feel that the catalog of music you've created over the years is better experienced in a live setting or at home where a listener can really ingest the intricacies you put into your music?
I would say a little bit of both. I got to be like 50-50 on it because the live experience is going to be totally different from actually listening to the music. The live experience, you get us, right? You get to see us. You get to see us interact with each other. You see us move. You get to hear us talk about, weird, crazy stories that kind of led up to, us creating these songs and trials and tribulations. The music itself, of course, is timeless, right? You can be anywhere, anytime. Jump on Spotify, Bandcamp, wherever you get your music from, Apple Music, and just kind of play. So I think the experience is really a 50-50 thing. I personally like live. The music itself, when you create it, it sells itself and it stands for itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think two different experiences also in the sense that live, it's very physical and it's like human interaction. But then if people can listen to it, then they're only absorbing what I'm saying, which oftentimes in most live shows, unless you know the music, you're not catching everything they're saying. Right. So a completely different experience. I guess since I'm gonna go with the stage one, just a little bit over, and only because I'm not at home with them when they listen to it.
Right.
So there isn't that same. So the moment that I can be with them, I cherish that probably more though, more so than them possibly fast forwarding through stuff, and I don't know they're doing that.
I like that.
Like
yeah.
that,
Yeah, I like that.
Taking it back, all the way back to your roots in hip hop. Did you have laser focus on what you wanted to achieve through producing your litany of artists, being a professor at Columbia College, infusing your activism into your music? Or have you been pleasantly surprised with the myriad of directions that your hip hop careers have taken you?
I think for me, in a way, both of those.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my destiny already told me what I'm here to do. In a way, like I could feel it. Did I have any ideas of how it was going to manifest? No. I had no intentions of teaching at Columbia, like who to thunk it, teaching hip hop, like all of this is crazy stuff. But I think my spirit knew that I was to be an activist. I knew that. That's why I was following these paths. So even like when we got invited to Ivory Coast, prior to that, I had already talked about Chicago Hip Hop Initiative and Urbanized Music and like international connections that we would have. I already talked about these things, but I had no idea that they would manifest. But I think if we are in tune with our purpose in life, then you will find yourself walking in that light, and it's just up to you to see what that light is all about. And so, yeah, so there was no laser folk. I had absolutely no idea, but at the same time, I felt like I had an idea. Like I knew this was going to happen. I just had no idea that this was going to happen like this.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Share the same thought process. I wasn't laser focused. I think if anything, I was moved by the spirit and the feeling of right what makes me feel good, what's comfortable. Laser focus, okay, if I got deadlines and projects and other stuff like that, but nothing. I think all of the blessings that have been able to come has been by me being able to adapt to different things, right, and kind of move and go with the flow. Yeah.
And some people are like super laser focused, like this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to go about doing, I'm going to plan the next 10 years out like this. But I don't think we approached it in that way. But to your point, like just following and doing what your spirit moves you to do. Sometimes you wind up where you're supposed to be. But I had absolutely no interest in, like in the 90s, I was trying to get put on. I was trying to get signed. We're doing all these other things. So thank God I didn't get signed in 94, because I probably would have, been a has-been by now. Maybe a couple of records or, whatever the trajectory might have been. Or I could have been going on tour during the 50 years. True enough. But the overwhelming odds suggest that I could have been just doing something else because maybe the industry would have changed or whatever. But we did what we were supposed to do then so that we could be where we are now doing this kind of stuff. So sometimes the things we plan don't happen, but the things that are supposed to happen.
How do you feel about the current state of hip-hop in Chicago, taking into consideration its genesis to the point it's at now and to where it's headed to in the future?
Well, I would say honestly, with all due respect, I would say about maybe 6 years ago, I had a different outlook on Chicago hip hop. And when I speak of hip hop, I'm not talking about the culture. I'm talking about rap music in particular, right? Because the culture itself is fine, from the b-boys, the DJ, graffiti artists, that's all, knowledge aspect, fine. But from the rap aspect, some of the drill stuff, some of the, senseless violence and stuff on wax. And don't get me wrong, I don't need all my hip hop to be clean and poppy, right? I love NWA, I love some cussing, some ghetto boys, stuff like that, right? You know what I mean? So, but when we start to destroy who we are as a people, then that's when I have a problem, right? So for a long time, I found myself being, being the old head that's like, I don't want to hear that crap from them. I'm tired of hearing them talk about this, and you know what I mean? And I wouldn't even give it the time of day, right? Then I started telling myself, okay, what can I really appreciate from it, right? So I would listen to it a little bit more and say, hey, I like the beat, right? Or I like the hook, or I like other things. But then as I really started to work with Amina more, be a guest in her class, talk with her students a little bit more, and then, ask them, hey, what do you like? Why do you like it, right? And start figuring out different things, right? Even little stuff like when we see artists of this generation, a lot of them will be on stage, and when they're performing, they're rapping over their vocals, right? For me, that's a pet peeve. I'm like, we come from, when we were learning, it was like the Temptations. You know how to do the steps, you had the background vocals, everything else. So to see them get up there and kind of rap over vocals, but as I talk to them more and find out, they're like, well, the reason why we do it sometimes is because we're on wax systems, right? Or this reason or other stuff, where I thought they were just being lazy, right? So it's talking to them and finding out their perspective and getting an understanding of where they are with it. And I think with that, I've started to change my thought process and say, okay, well, tell me a little bit more why you rapped about that, or what does that mean to you, right? And share more of my stories, because really all that is just documenting their narrative within a piece of paper. That doesn't mean that they're not necessarily living it, right? But I've learned how to appreciate music as a whole and not just shun something because a person is not maybe rapping from a perspective that I would like.
Yeah. I think history is so important, and a lot of younger artists don't have access to that history. They just have access to what's in front of them. And I remember when I really started noticing a shift when I saw kids on stage simply emulating what was happening in videos. Like, they didn't rehearse. They don't even know how to hold the mic. They can't work the stage. They just do whatever the people in the videos are doing. So everybody be on the stage, they'd be yelling. And I realized that we weren't really passing the torch of the craft. They were learning hip hop from TV. Most of us learned hip hop from community and people who showed us, and we learned and we practiced and we built. And many of them, that's where I saw a lot of the rapping over the vocals, because they don't know that you're supposed to memorize your lines
and that's
know your song and like embody it. Yeah. So I'll still have students and young people who will just be like, okay, I'm gonna do this song, and they're like doing it off their phone. And I'm like, no, that's not the craft. So I think, but the more they learn that, the more they learn the craft, the more they're exposed, the more they're taught, the better they represent the craft. And then to the point of the music reflecting for a lot of, especially when you talk about like trap and drill and music that really reflects the epitome of whatever inner city life is like, there's a reason they make that music. There's a reason why you might not hear coherent thoughts, and like it's not conceptual, because here are people that may have, and it's not, generalizing, but in many cases, maybe kids who aren't, academically savvy and where they should be, maybe dropped out of school, maybe don't have the faculties, maybe can't hold an intelligent conversation. All they can do is narrate what they see around them. And so that's what they're doing. But in the same token, you hear music from other young artists, and I won't name names, but you can tell the music from kids who their parents went to college, they went to college, their grandparents, like you can hear the difference. And so I think if hip hop is a barometer of what's happening, then music that is maybe not so pretty reflects a not so pretty thing that's happening. And so unlike, like you were saying, some of our peers or some old heads who are like, they're damn these children and this horrible music they're making.
Right.
But why are they making this music? Why are they rapping about guns? How does everybody in the video have a gun? Like, these are the real issues. And so I think that for me, that's where I shine the attention on why this kind of music is being created, rather than condemning them for making it. But there are also, to that same token, a lot of young people who are incredible, who are savvy, who are smart, who understand the culture, who understand the power of their pen and their voice. And unfortunately, they might not be getting the same spotlight, but it's also a whole different world with the internet and the accessibility of so much music. But there are an equal amount of young people doing amazing, incredible things, both as artists, as activists, as well as there are some young people who are showing us the uglier sides of who we are and pointing to issues that we really need to fix in our society.
But definitely encouraged in the opportunity for an outlook being positive. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And the more they know, the better they can live and be. So the more empowered they are, the more empowering the music they create. And that's why we try to inspire young. Like, I had a kid one semester who was like straight, like all his music was about getting high, not getting high, like getting like incoherently high, and selling drugs and maybe shooting people. And I, like, he was a kid, I kind of, like, I didn't write him off, but I'm kind of like, okay, he's one of those kids. He was so engaged. Like, Kingdom came to my class with a scrapbook of, like, old flyers and Chicago stuff, and he was like, yeah, see, this is what I've been looking for. Like, this is the information that I've been wanting to see. Mm-hmm. So if we don't empower them with the knowledge, how can we expect them to do things better? But I've seen them, once they get it, their eyes light up and they feel like, oh, this, I knew hip hop was more than I was being told. Yeah. The internet and commercialism, the industry just took the power of hip hop away from us, and they just packaged and sold what they chose to sell. And, you know, I fault us a little bit because I always talk about how I feel like we dropped the ball because we were all too busy trying to get signed, that we didn't realize there was a torch to be passed. Yeah. We were just trying to do our thing, and now we look up and we're like, oh, they don't know this, and oh, they don't know that. But I don't think we even realize that, oh, we're supposed to be like archiving and teaching and I mean, people did it, but as a whole, I think we're just now realizing the value and how much we missed by not giving the kids everything they need. It's like, I often talk about like kids learning about sex from their friends. Like, what does he know? He's 13 like you. So we have to educate them, because otherwise they learn from each other and then we're mad. Unless, of course, you take my hip hop course, in which I lay it all out and then I can see how it impacts them. But they're not going to go through, you know, all these catalogs. They don't even know what to go through. Yes. But when they find out, because they will ask, like, can you give me like a playlist? Can you give me some songs to go listen to? They want to know, but they don't know. Where do they, like, look at all these records. Where do you start?
And they are so excited when they find out. That's the cool thing, right? When you're talking to them and, you know, they'll run off some, you heard of Metro Boomin, or, you know, some producer or something. I'll be like, well, you guys know about Nas, you know, or I'll mention somebody and they'll be like, I've never heard of them. I'll send them a couple of links that go down a rabbit hole. Next time I see him a few months later, like, yo, man, I listen to everything in the catalog. He's so dope. I'm glad you put me onto it. Yep. Here, you need to listen to that. But that was the same way we were exposed to music, right? Our friends had tapes, right? Yeah. You know, I had a friend, Shiny Shine, who would always go back to Connecticut every summer to be with his family. He'd come back with the WBLS tapes with Marley Marl and all of those cats on it. So I'm listening to Rakim the first time on an actual mixtape from New York, way before it gets to Chicago, you know what I mean? So I'm walking around school like, yo, I'm better than you because I know, you know what I mean? But that's how we exchange the music. So it's the same thing. They just don't know it exists because, to Amina's point, they're only listening to things within 2 years in front of them or 2 years behind them. They're not going 10, 15 years back. And when you start giving them the stories, like literally if you talk to them about LL Cool J, they're going to say CSI and that's it.
Yeah.
right? But if you tell them no, LL was like the man, like
That's what they
battle
always
rapper,
say, yeah.
like and then you start talking about Rock the Bells and Shady 45 and all these other things, and now he's opened up this enterprise for other hip hop artists. They're like, oh my God, I had no idea. It's like I thought he was just an actor on TV, right? Or Queen Latifah or something.
I had a student who was like, I didn't know Queen Latifah rapped. I'm like, where do you think she got Queen Latifah from? Like, yeah.
So her mom and them name.
I had a student who was a DJ who never heard of Kool Herc.
Yeah.
So it's, is it their fault that
No.
they turned on the internet or the YouTube and it was there and they just don't know to connect those dots? And, unfortunately there are too many of us ridiculing them and writing them off and mad because they have Serato and don't have to carry records. That, back in my day, we used to have to...
We carried 16 crates around and I had cramps on my hands. And the thing about it, too, though, with that, and I've noticed a lot of, and I'll just add DJs who are technology-based from Serato and everything else, they are so amazed when it comes to learning how to actually use vinyl because they know that that's where it came from. When somebody tells them, right? When nobody tells them, they think that pushing a button and cue buttons is all it is and sync buttons. But when somebody says, no, let me bring you on an actual Technique 1200 turntable, let me show it how to adjust the pitch, let me show you how to beat match, then they're like, oh my God, that makes more sense because they understand what work it took for a DJ to actually beat match two records or to scratch or to pull it back or doing these different things. Or now you just hit a button, right? But when they get an opportunity to learn on vinyl, I've seen some DJs be like, go back. I mean, these are people who are like out in the clubs and they've been doing it for 10, 15 years making money and like, yo, I never learned how to actually DJ on vinyl. I want to learn.
It's clear your veritable bag of tricks is bottomless, and you're both chock full of talent when it comes to making music. With that being said, does carefully crafting a well thought out song hold more credence with you over coming up with an off the top freestyle?
Ooh.
Oh, I can answer that right away. I do not come off the top with the freestyle. I'm an overthinker. I overthink everything, and a couple of times people have caught me off guard and like, yo, and they'd hand me a mic and I have to freestyle, and I'm okay. But then I start thinking like, wait, don't say anything offensive. Wait, don't be rude. Wait, did you just such and such? Wait, you're thinking too hard. And then by that time, my freestyle is like, a cat sat on a hat and it had a bat, and it's really lame. So I'm way more comfortable crafting, getting my thoughts out. Some people are amazing on the off the top, but I think I think too much, and so that is not my lane. So I'm gonna go for door number 1.
All right, so I'm gonna jump in where she said with door number 1. In public, yeah, on the freestyling, but behind closed doors, she's a beast. Seriously,
I will freestyle.
if I put on something at home and she just it just shoots off like a
because
rocket.
I'm comfortable, because I know that I'm not gonna be judged. No one's critiquing. No one's and that's why. But in front of people, I'm shy.
Yes. Now, for me, on the other hand, I'm a Libran, so I'm very spontaneous. So I think freestyling, it just kind of comes natural to me, and it kind of like helps me. I like the challenge of thinking the next 3-4 lines of illness that I'm gonna say out of. So if I say something, so I enjoy the on the spot coming up with something. So even when I'm creating music, there is no blueprint. I'm not sitting out saying, okay, I want to make a track that sounds like this. I just start wherever my senses tell me to start. If that's with the drum, then I start with that. If it's the chorus, whatever it is. So for me, the freestyle and on the cuff is just so much better for me, because it helps me then craft. It might be a few lines or it might be a hook, and then I'm like, okay, now, and then I'll sit down. But Amino, like sometimes Amino already have 3 or 4 hooks written for a particular song and say, hey, this is the concept, this is what we're going to go with. I'll throw on a beat in there and be like, all right, let's make something right now. She's like, here we go. You know what I mean? So but I prefer the freestyle, kind of just jump into it, as opposed to sitting down and really crafting the song and thinking about it so much. I don't have the patience.
So door number 2?
Door number 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
I dig it.
Yes.
Through your mentorship at Columbia College and producing up and coming artists, as well as having your own talented daughter collaborate on music with you, what is the most important aspect of bestowing your wealth of knowledge on the next generation?
I would say, well, one, I think a highlight moment for me was to have my daughter feature on the song with Erratic Static featuring that OG called Black People Unite, which the hook was actually written by my lovely wife Amina here as well. So it was really a whole family affair. I think the biggest thing is I think kind of backtracks to what I said a few questions ago, is just really being there for them, right, and giving them what they need, right. When they ask for something, don't be like, here we go again. Like, let's talk about it, right. Exposing them to different ideas, different ways of thoughts, different ways to even have conflict resolution. This is even outside of music, but giving them the tools so that they can be successful in whatever they're doing. I think that's just the biggest thing for me.
I think being a steward of the culture and doing the job that I need to do with the part of the culture that I have access to in the moment, taking care of it so that I pass it on and show them how to take care of it, and just like being a part of the continuum of the culture.
All right, so we are at the end of our journey.
Yes.
We have went through beginning to end of this amazing interview, finding out so much more about what makes Cool Out Chris and Amina Hawkins tick.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the genius minds behind the music and everything else that you've provided for Chicago hip-hop. But on this last question, we're going to delve into the hypothetical range a little bit.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, this is 100% hypothetical.
Okay.
If your careers were to end today, and for any number of reasons, just like, you know what, I'm done with hip-hop. I'm done with teaching. I'm done with everything. Like, I just want to relax. And walk away from everything that I love. Is there a moment in your past that you could proudly put your hat on as the zenith of your career?
Wow. I'm gonna still revert back to Chicago Hip Hop Heritage Month. I mean, I think nothing doing something for your city, I think, is selfless. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would probably be the biggest. Sorry to take that from you, Amina, but
That's okay. I have another one.
Okay,
But it's part of that.
okay.
I think that, but also in a selfless kind of a way, that people know that I put it all on the line for hip hop. Like, I gave it all to hip hop. My contributions to the culture, from Hip Hop Heritage Month, from helping create a hip hop studies minor at Columbia, hip hop festival, like all the civic engagement and hip hop political stuff that I've done, for folks to know that this woman dedicated her work to hip hop. I think I could walk away and I could live on a farm somewhere and know that, yeah, they know I put in the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just to be able to look back at all of the stuff that was created, from the catalogs to the interactions to the meeting people, conversations, all of those different things. Like, that's something that you can kind of, put your head on the hat rack and then kind of walk away and say, hey, I did my job. You know? Yeah.
Because it makes me think about, because we started organizing, doing events in '94. That's one of the things that we started, event-wise. And there are people who now who met at our events, got married, have children. There's so many people who are like, you guys did this and you guys helped open this path and you guys put us on the first show. And so I think just having that kind of influence and playing that role in people's lives through just doing hip hop, those are the kinds of things that I feel
very rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What he said.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you
Thank
two
you. You can
Thank
rest
you.
your heart.
two beautiful people
Yes.
for sitting down with us and giving us some insight into what makes them tick. I look forward to hearing more out of you guys for the rest of time. You know, I mean,
Thank
I
you.
don't know. I don't really have a good end note for this,
That was
Oh, that's great. That's
but
perfect.
you know, I thank you both. If you guys have links, share it with the camera, like how people can find your music.
Absolutely. You guys can catch us anything, everything, all Urbanized Music at www.urbanizedmusic.com. I didn't add the HTTP / none of that stuff, but urbanizedmusic.com, at Urbanized Music Shy on all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So
Yeah, Google us.
Google us. You might find some interesting things.
Oh gosh.